My husband caught me on FaceTime with his coworker. He left me and my son. I'm Raylan, 34 years old, and I honestly never imagined I'd be telling this story to anyone. It's been 8 months since everything fell apart, and I'm still trying to make sense of how I managed to destroy the one good thing I had going for me. Maybe if I tell it from the beginning, I'll finally understand how someone like me, someone who thought she was smarter than this, could make such spectacular mistakes. Andre and I met at a community festival 4 years ago. He was working security, all broad shoulders and easy smile, and I was there with my 7-year-old son, trying to give him a normal Saturday after another week of just the two of us against the world. Single motherhood had been harder than I'd expected, especially after my son's father decided fatherhood wasn't for him when the kid was barely 2. Andre noticed my son had dropped his balloon and chased it down 3 blocks, bringing it back with this genuine grin that made my stomach flutter in a way I'd forgotten was possible. We started dating slowly. Andre drove a delivery truck for a local distributor, steady work that meant early mornings and sometimes late nights, but he never complained. He'd show up at my tiny apartment with groceries he'd picked up anyway and stay for dinner, helping my son with homework at the kitchen table while I tried to cook something that didn't come from a box. Within 8 months, we were talking about moving in together, and by year 2, we were married at the courthouse with my son as our witness and Andre's sister taking photos on her phone. Andre wasn't wealthy, but he was reliable in ways I'd never experienced. He fixed things when they broke, remembered to change the oil in my car, and never once made me feel like my son was anything other than his own. When we moved into a small rental house across town, Andre spent weekends painting the kids' room and building shelves. He taught my son to throw a football and helped him with his science fair project on volcanoes. I thought I'd finally figured out how to be happy. The problem was I got comfortable, too comfortable. Andre worked long days, sometimes 10 or 11 hours, and came home exhausted. I'd started working part-time at a veterinary clinic, mostly answering phones and scheduling appointments, but it was easy work that left me with plenty of energy at the end of the day. While Andre collapsed on the couch with his dinner, I'd be restless, wanting to talk about my day or plan something for the weekend. He'd nod along, but I could see he was mentally checked out, and gradually I stopped trying so hard to engage him. That's when I started spending more time on my phone. Social media, mostly, reconnecting with old friends and following people whose lives looked more exciting than mine. I'd scroll through Instagram while Andre watched television, living vicariously through travel photos and restaurant meals I couldn't afford. It felt harmless enough, a way to pass time while my husband recharged from his day. The shift happened so gradually, I didn't notice it at first. I'd spend longer in bed in the mornings after Andre left for work, sometimes until 9 or 10, scrolling through my phone instead of getting up to make my son breakfast. I'd throw together whatever was easiest, cereal, frozen waffles, leftover pizza, and tell myself it wasn't a big deal because kids don't need elaborate meals anyway. The house started getting messier because I'd put off cleaning until tomorrow, then the day after that. Andre would come home to dishes in the sink and clothes piled on chairs, but he'd just quietly clean up what he could and never said anything about it. Looking back, I think Andre's silence was him trying to be understanding. He knew I'd been on my own with my son for years before we met, and maybe he thought I deserved to take it easier now that he was there to help carry the load. But instead of appreciating his consideration, I took it as permission to do less and less. The real trouble started about 6 months ago when I began talking to Cody, one of Andre's coworkers. It began innocently enough. Cody had been at our house for a barbecue and mentioned he was going through a rough divorce. I felt sorry for him, and when he started texting me occasionally to vent about his ex-wife or ask for advice about dealing with lawyers, I thought I was just being a good friend. Andre knew we talked sometimes, and he didn't seem bothered by it. But gradually, the conversations became more frequent and more personal. Cody would complain about feeling lonely, and I'd share how isolated I sometimes felt with Andre working such long hours. We'd commiserate about feeling underappreciated, him by his ex-wife, me by Andre, who seemed to take everything I did for granted. Before long, we were texting daily, sometimes for hours at a time. What made it worse was how different I felt when talking to Cody compared to how I felt around Andre. With Cody, I found myself being funnier, more engaging, more like the person I used to be before marriage and routine made me feel invisible. He'd ask about my dreams and opinions in ways Andre hadn't in months. When I'd mention wanting to travel someday or go back to school, Cody would encourage those ideas instead of bringing up practical concerns about money and time like Andre always did. I started looking forward to Cody's messages in a way that should have been a red flag. I'd check my phone constantly, hoping for a text from him, and feel disappointed when hours passed without hearing from him. Meanwhile, when Andre would text me during his workday, usually something mundane about dinner plans or asking if we needed anything from the store, I'd respond with brief, distracted answers because I was too busy crafting clever responses to Cody's messages. The emotional investment I was making in Cody became increasingly obvious in how I treated Andre. When my husband would try to tell me about his day, I'd listen with half an ear while mentally composing things I wanted to tell Cody later. When Andre would suggest we watch a movie together or go out for dinner, I'd agree, but spend the entire time thinking about conversations I'd had with Cody or planning what I'd say to him next. I was physically present with my husband, but emotionally absent, saving my real attention and enthusiasm for someone else. I justified it by telling myself that Andre and I had just settled into a comfortable routine, that this was normal for married couples. But deep down, I knew I was using Cody to fill emotional needs that I should have been addressing within my marriage. Instead of talking to Andre about feeling disconnected or unappreciated, I was getting those needs met elsewhere, and then resenting Andre for not providing something I'd never actually asked him for. The guilt started eating at me, but not enough to make me stop. I'd feel awful after particularly long conversations with Cody, especially when they happened while Andre was home, working in the yard or helping my son with homework. I'd look at my husband being reliable and steady and think about how he deserved better. But then Cody would text something that made me laugh or ask for my advice on something, and I'd be right back to prioritizing him over Andre. I knew it was getting inappropriate, but I told myself it wasn't really cheating because nothing physical was happening. Cody lived across town, and we never met up alone. It was just talking, just friendship. When the texting turned into phone calls, I rationalized that too. When the phone calls became video calls on my laptop while Andre was at work, I convinced myself it still didn't cross any real lines because we were just talking. The truth was, I loved the attention. Cody listened to me complain about my day and seemed genuinely interested in my opinions about movies and books and current events. He complimented my appearance and made me feel interesting in ways Andre hadn't in months. When Andre came home tired and wanting to zone out in front of the television, I'd think about how different things were with Cody, who always seemed eager to hear from me. I started putting more effort into how I looked during the day, doing my makeup and picking out nicer clothes for my video calls with Cody. I'd plan our conversations, thinking of funny stories to tell him or questions to ask about his life. Meanwhile, when Andre came home, I'd greet him in whatever I'd thrown on that morning, hair unwashed, barely looking up from my phone. The day everything imploded was a Tuesday in March. Andre had left for work at his usual time, 6:30 in the morning, kissing me goodbye like he always did while I pretended to be asleep. I'd stayed in bed until almost 10, then spent the morning texting with Cody about his weekend plans. By afternoon, I was on a video call with him, sitting on our couch in pajamas and a robe, laughing about something ridiculous his ex-wife had done. I was so absorbed in our conversation that I completely lost track of time. Andre usually didn't get home until 6 at the earliest, sometimes later if there were delays with deliveries. But that Tuesday, they'd finished early, and I didn't hear his truck in the driveway. The front door opened just as Cody was telling me some story that had me laughing harder than I had in weeks. I looked up to see Andre standing in the doorway, his lunch cooler in one hand and his keys in the other, staring at me. His expression went through several stages: confusion, recognition, then something that looked like physical pain. I fumbled to close the laptop, but it was too late. Andre had seen everything, me in my pajamas in the middle of the afternoon, the house a complete disaster around me, and Cody's face filling my laptop screen. In that moment, I saw myself through Andre's eyes, and the image was mortifying. "Seriously," Andre said, his voice quiet but loaded with disbelief. "This is what you do while I'm at work." I couldn't find words. What was I supposed to say? That it wasn't what it looked like. We both knew exactly what it looked like. Andre set down his things slowly, deliberately, and I could see him trying to process what he'd walked into. He looked around at the living room, my coffee cup from the morning still on the table, yesterday's mail scattered across the counter, a pile of clean laundry that had been sitting unfolded on the chair for 3 days. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, still in that eerily calm voice. I wanted to lie to minimize it, but something in his tone told me this wasn't the time for half-truths. "A few months," I whispered. "A few months." He repeated it like he was testing how the words sounded. "With Cody," I nodded, feeling smaller by the second. Andre ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was trying to keep his temper in check. "You have any idea how this looks, Raylan? How this makes me feel?" I shook my head, though of course I knew. I'd known all along, which was why I'd hidden it. "I leave here every morning at 6:30 to go bust my ass for 10 hours so we can keep this house, so your son can have a stable home, so you can work part-time and not worry about money. And while I'm doing that, you're here in your pajamas talking to my coworker like some kind of..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's not like that," I said weakly. "We're just friends, we just talk." The look Andre gave me could have frozen fire. "Just talk. Are you kidding me right now? You think I'm stupid, Raylan? You think I don't know what this is?" He was right, and we both knew it. It might not have been a physical affair, but it was an emotional one, and in some ways that felt worse. I'd given Cody pieces of myself that I'd stopped sharing with Andre. I'd saved my best energy, my most engaging conversation, my attention and care for someone else while treating my husband like a roommate who happened to pay the bills. "Andre, please," I started, but he held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." He looked around the room again, taking in the mess, taking in me in my pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. "This is my fault, isn't it? I enabled this." "I let you think this was okay." "No, that's not." "It is, though." His voice was getting harder now, the calm facade cracking. "I worked extra hours so you could cut back to part-time. I took care of the yard work, the car maintenance, the repairs around here because I thought you needed a break. I never asked you to do more because I didn't want you to feel pressured, and this is what you did with that freedom." I had no defense because he was absolutely right. Andre had been incredibly supportive, taking on more than his share so I could have an easier life, and I'd repaid him by checking out emotionally and carrying on an inappropriate relationship with his coworker. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place tonight," he said finally. "I need to think about this." "Andre, wait." "No, Raylan, I can't look at you right now. I can't be in this house right now." He grabbed some clothes from our bedroom and left without another word. I sat on that couch for hours afterward, staring at my closed laptop and trying to figure out how I'd let things get so bad. Cody texted me later that evening, probably wondering what had happened when our call got cut off so abruptly. I didn't respond. In fact, I never spoke to him again. Seeing Andre's face when he found us talking made me realize how selfish and destructive my behavior had been. Whatever validation I'd gotten from Cody's attention wasn't worth destroying my marriage. But the damage was already done. Andre came home the next day, but he was different, distant, polite but cold. He'd answer direct questions and help my son with homework, but he barely looked at me. When I tried to apologize, to explain, to promise I'd cut off contact with Cody, he'd just nod and change the subject. I threw myself into trying to make things right. I deep cleaned the house, started cooking elaborate dinners, made sure I was dressed and ready when he came home from work. I deleted social media apps from my phone and picked up extra shifts at the veterinary clinic. I thought if I could just prove I was taking our marriage seriously now, Andre would forgive me. But it was too little, too late. Andre wasn't cruel about it, but he'd made up his mind. One evening, about 2 weeks after he'd caught me with Cody, he asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. "I've been thinking about us," he said, his tone gentle but firm. About what I want and what I can live with. My heart started racing because I knew from his expression this wasn't going to be good news. I can't get past this, Raylan. I've tried, but I can't. Every time I look at you, I think about you sitting there laughing with Cody while I was at work. I think about all the times I came home tired and you barely looked up from your phone, and now I know why. You were saving your energy for someone else. I ended it, I said desperately. I haven't talked to him since that day. I'll never talk to him again. I know you ended it, but that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fact that for months, you were more excited to talk to my coworker than your own husband. It doesn't change the fact that you let our life together fall apart while you were focused on someone else. I wanted to argue, to protest that I'd made a mistake, but I could fix it. But the words wouldn't come because I knew he was right. I had prioritized Cody over Andre for months. I'd given my emotional energy to someone else while treating my husband like an afterthought. I want a separation, Andre said quietly. I'm going to move in with my brother for a while, and we're going to figure out what comes next. What about my son? I asked, tears starting to flow. Andre had been the only stable father figure in my son's life. I'll still be there for him if he wants me to be. This isn't his fault, and I'm not going to punish him for your choices. But I can't stay married to you, Raylan. I can't trust you anymore, and without trust, we don't have anything. Andre moved out the following weekend. He was kind about it, explaining to my son that sometimes adults need space to figure things out, promising to stay in touch and continue their weekend fishing trips. He took only what he needed and left the rest, including all the furniture and household items he'd bought. That was 5 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month. Andre kept his word about maintaining a relationship with my son, picking him up every other weekend and taking him to baseball games and movies. They have a good relationship, better than my son ever had with his biological father, and I'm grateful for that, even though seeing Andre hurts every time. I've had a lot of time to think about what went wrong, and the hardest part is accepting that I sabotaged my own happiness. Andre wasn't perfect. He could be tired and uncommunicative after work, and maybe we'd settled into a routine that wasn't particularly romantic. But he was a good man who loved me and treated my son like his own. He worked hard to provide for us and never complained about taking on extra responsibilities so I could have an easier life. Instead of appreciating what I had, I looked for excitement elsewhere. Instead of talking to Andre about feeling disconnected, I found connection with someone else. Instead of putting effort into my marriage, I put effort into a relationship that was destined to go nowhere and destroy everything I'd built. I understand now that emotional affairs can be more damaging than physical ones because they involve sharing the intimate parts of yourself, your thoughts, your daily experiences, your dreams and frustrations, with someone other than your partner. I gave Cody the best parts of myself, while Andre got whatever was left over at the end of the day. The consequences have been severe. I had to move my son and myself into a smaller apartment because I couldn't afford the house on my own. I've increased my hours at the clinic, but the pay isn't great, and money is constantly tight. My son has been remarkably resilient, but I know the disruption has been hard on him. He misses living with Andre and asks sometimes why we can't all be together again. I've started going to counseling, something I probably should have done years ago. My therapist has helped me understand that my pattern of checking out when life gets routine or challenging is something I've done in previous relationships too. I have a tendency to take good things for granted and look for excitement elsewhere instead of investing in what I have. The loneliness has been the hardest part. Not just missing Andre, though I do miss him terribly, but missing the life we had together. Coming home to someone who cared about my day, having another adult to share the responsibilities of parenting, feeling like part of a team instead of handling everything alone. I'd forgotten how exhausting single motherhood could be. I've tried dating a little, though my heart isn't really in it yet. The men I've met seem nice enough, but I find myself comparing them to Andre, which isn't fair to anyone. More importantly, I'm not sure I trust myself to make better choices. The counseling is helping, but I'm still working on understanding why I'm drawn to drama and validation from inappropriate sources instead of being content with stability and genuine partnership. There are moments when I wonder if Andre and I could have worked things out if I'd been more honest about my feelings of disconnection earlier in our marriage. Maybe if I'd told him I was feeling lonely and unappreciated, we could have found ways to reconnect instead of me seeking that connection elsewhere. But I'll never know because I chose the path I chose, and now I have to live with the consequences. What I've learned is that good relationships require ongoing effort and investment from both people. You can't just coast on the initial excitement and assume everything will be fine. When you stop putting energy into your partnership, stop being curious about your partner's inner life, stop making them feel valued and appreciated, the relationship begins to die whether you realize it or not. I also learned that emotional intimacy is just as much a choice as physical fidelity. Every time I chose to share something meaningful with Cody instead of Andre, I was betraying our marriage. Every time I saved my best mood, my most engaging conversation, my attention and interest for someone else, I was withdrawing from the person I'd promised to build a life with. The hardest lesson has been accepting that some mistakes can't be undone. Andre isn't a vindictive person, and he doesn't hate me, but he's moved on. He's dating someone new now, a woman I've seen picking up my son a couple of times when Andre takes him places. She seems nice, and my son likes her, which I suppose I should be glad about. But watching Andre build a life with someone else while I'm still struggling to figure out my own mess is humbling in ways I couldn't have imagined. I think about Andre often, about the life we could have had if I'd made different choices. He was the kind of partner most people hope to find, reliable, hardworking, genuinely caring about my son and me. He wasn't flashy or particularly romantic, but he was steady and trustworthy, qualities I failed to appreciate until they were gone. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if he ever thinks about me, if he ever misses what we had together. But then, I remember how he looked at me that day he caught me on the video call with Cody. Not just angry, but disappointed and hurt in a way that went deeper than anger. I remember how he tried to make our marriage work for weeks afterward, and how I could see him pulling away a little more each day as he realized he couldn't get past what I'd done. My son has adjusted better than I expected, though he still asks sometimes if Andre might come back. I've learned to answer honestly that Andre will always be in his life, but we won't be living together as a family anymore. It's a conversation that breaks my heart every time, knowing I'm responsible for disrupting the stability my son had found. If I could go back and change things, I would never have started talking to Cody the way I did. I would have paid more attention to the distance growing between Andre and me and addressed it directly instead of looking elsewhere for connection. I would have appreciated the good man I had instead of taking him for granted while fantasizing about something more exciting. But I can't go back. All I can do is try to learn from my mistakes and be a better person going forward. I'm working on being more present for my son, more appreciative of the good things in my life, and more honest about my own patterns of behavior that have caused problems in relationships. The divorce is final, Andre has moved on, and I'm slowly building a new life as a single mother again. It's not the life I wanted, and it's much harder than the life I threw away, but it's the life I created through my own choices. The only thing I can control now is how I handle it going forward, and whether I learn enough from this experience to avoid making the same mistakes again. I still love Andre, and I probably always will. He was the best thing that ever happened to me and my son, and I destroyed it through my own selfishness and poor judgment. That's a burden I'll carry for the rest of my life, along with the knowledge that some mistakes are too big to fix and some trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired.